Hey all, here OS Reviews. You're watching our throwback hands-on of the Kyocera Hydro. This is really the first budget smartphone that offered waterproofing to US customers several years ago. In fact, it has absolutely entry-level specs by today's standards, including just a single-core 1 GHz processor and a pretty small 4-inch display. But again, that rugged form factor was its main selling point. What's interesting is I was unable to obtain a new or refurbished model from Kyocera, or let's say from Boost Mobile, and the only version that I found online was through this carrier called Patriot Mobile. This is in no means a review of Patriot Mobile services, but I also thought it was kind of interesting that they were still selling this device now as a prepaid package. Basically, you can pick up this phone for around $25 to $30, and it includes 15 days of unlimited talk and text with 500 megabytes of data included. So it's been pre-activated. We have the short-term unlimited use, and it even extends to international calling. So if you want to contact someone, let's say from Canada or China, that's also thrown in for free. That actually seems like a pretty good package as well as idea if you are traveling for a short term. If you're staying somewhere for 2 weeks, let's say you don't have your regular service or there's a lot of roaming costs, then this actually might be a pretty affordable option. They do also have a standard plan, so after the 2 weeks expires, you can extend the life of the phone by buying a more traditional pay-as-you-go plan, such as $9.99 for XYZ, and you can customize it more through their website. So this seems like a pretty similar carrier to a lot of the smaller carriers I've been seeing recently that are piggybacking off of larger networks such as T-Mobile, Sprint, or Verizon. All right, so the packaging here is very hard to get open, so we're just going to do a quick jump cut, and on top we have just a phone and this little card that says, please fully charge the battery before you use the phone, and the Y isn't even printed. So here's the phone. We'll take a closer look at it in a second, and down below here we have a few accessories, including a micro USB cable, so pretty standard stuff. It should take just a little bit under 2 hours to completely charge. There is the battery here, so if we take a quick look, it has a 1,500 milliamp hour capacity, which should be sufficient for such a small phone that doesn't really have super powerful internals. And we also have some documentation from Patriot Mobile, including their plans as well as services, but there isn't any manuals or documentation specific to the phone. Right, so going back now to the Hydro, let's peel off the screen protector. And you can tell that there are rubber seals which prevent water from leaking in. It's kind of different from modern day flagships, which are also waterproof, such as the Galaxy S8 or the LG G6. They have internal waterproofing, as well as circuit boards have been treated so that it repels water. Now the cover has been locked into place, and it does have this texture to it that definitely makes it seem like a rugged device, along with a thick rubber coating that probably also absorbs a little bit of shock if you do accidentally drop this phone. And it has 3G but no 4G. There's also a power key on the side. Let's try tapping on this for a few seconds to see if there's any juice left in the battery pack. Seems like there should be a little bit. And on the top, there's also rubber covers protecting the micro USB port for charging. There is a standard headphone port, however, that doesn't look like it's covered up, so it's been treated. Kyocera has really continued the Hydro line, and even today they manufacture many of the low-cost, budget, rugged/waterproof phones you can find in the US, mostly on prepaid networks such as Boost Mobile, on Sprint and Verizon. So that's something that hasn't really changed. The Hydro was really their first foot, and afterwards they just made slightly more powerful and larger display phones. The Hydro actually only has a 3.5-inch display, so that's a correction. It's not 4 inches. It's the same size as the original iPhone, so it's definitely been a while compared to much more recent smartphones. You'll notice a huge difference in terms of the size. But still, there's something that is quietly attractive about being able to hold the phone easily with one hand and access all edges of the screen without having to really fumble or reach around. If we do another size comparison, here's the Nokia N9, which has a 4-inch screen, as aforementioned, so that's a slight difference there in terms of the height, but the thickness is roughly the same, so not too bad considering that this is a rugged phone. Also, the camera on the back comes in at only 3.2 megapixels, so not even 5 megapixels. Should have expected that considering that this is really an old phone, and there's no front-facing camera either, so you couldn't use this for Skype or video chatting. Alright, so let's open this up. We are running on the original OS, which is Android 4.0 Ice Cream Sandwich, so there weren't too many dramatic changes that Kyocera made to things like the drag down shade, or even the launcher of apps over here. Everything actually seems to be pretty much what Google intended and designed. Sure, you'll find a bit of bloatware. Some specific Kyocera apps include an eco mode that just makes the battery last a little bit longer, and there's another battery application, which is just a shortcut to the settings that tells you how long it's been turned on. Kind of neat that it's built on there. And there's also some additional kind of messaging apps that is specific to the carrier that's also built on here. This phone does have GPS, it does have Wi-Fi, it does have Bluetooth, so the standard connectivity options for a Android smartphone, even back then. The irony is, despite having a really small screen, I actually find it to be pretty responsive for typing. There is swipe built in as well, as compared to also budget-oriented cheap phones on the market today from companies, let's say, by Bluebo or Doogee. So if you load it up to New York Times, and surprisingly it's actually render the page without any security warnings popping up or certificate warnings, since the browser is probably severely out of date, but it's actually functional, which is again very surprising. We are using the original WebKit-based browser instead of Google Chrome because back in the day Android didn't come with Chrome pre-installed. Other specs aside from the 1 GHz Snapdragon processor include only 512 megabytes of RAM and a whopping 2 gigs of storage, part of that already occupied by the operating system, which is why you really do want a micro SD card if you plan on taking images. It does have a flash, which you can use as a flashlight in the dark, so that at least helps, especially since this is a rugged phone. And under settings, you can change things also like the auto balance, scene selection, geotagging, but it's not too advanced. And surprisingly, YouTube has also loaded up without any problems directly from the browser. It's the mobile site, and we're going to do a sample of the audio here. So pausing the audio there, it's pretty bad, mainly because the speaker is both tinny as well as mounted on the back, but at least it is again a rugged phone, so it produces ample volume. It's just, again, there's not bass, there's not much depth in the sound, and it gets really easily muffled up by the placement of your hand. Let's see how it fares if we just dump it into a cup, and let's say if you pour a little bit over the display. So again, if you are taking underwater images, it's a little challenging since you can't really tap on the shutter key since the screen is unresponsive. But you can start recording video ahead of time, dive into water, and kind of use it as a rugged camcorder of sorts, or as a cheap action camera replacement, then it does work in that sense. That's the Kyocera Hydro Revisited. It was never a powerful phone even back in its day. However, it was one of the first commercially available devices that had waterproofing, also at an affordable price. And of course, that's a feature we now find very common across flagships in 2018. So it's interesting how this trend or this particular feature has caught on. So as a backup phone in 2018, is this usable? I would say perhaps. For phone calls, for quick text messaging, since the screen is more sensitive than I thought, even though it has pretty washed out colors, and also web browsing being surprisingly still functional in addition to loading up pages without too many problems, as long as you keep multitasking to a minimum and gaming to a minimum. It does still work, I guess, as a backup phone, but it all depends on price. If you can find this thing for, let's say, $15 or even less than that, maybe as a backup phone that really comes with service, and you're visiting a country for the first time for a very limited duration, then this isn't really a bad backup slash burner phone that you won't really feel bad if you damage, lose, or of course drop into water. So thanks for watching this video here at OS Reviews. This was a look back at the Kyocera Hydro.